right, and we are here today with Gabe Dean. How you doing today, Gabe?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Let me go ahead and intro the show and let the people know who we're talking to today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're here with Gabe Dean. He's a two-time NCAA champion, four-time All-American athlete for Cornell, the Big Red. He is a four-time EIWA champion, two-time Ivy League Wrestler of the Year, and you must really like Cornell because you decided to stick around and become the assistant coach under Rob Cole. How are things up in Ithaca right now?
Yeah, as much as Coach Cole likes to make fun of me, I guess he likes keeping me around a little bit. No, great, man. I've been blessed and definitely just thankful for the opportunity to learn under one of the sport's greatest coaches of all time. So it's been a lot of fun.
You know, it's actually funny that you put it that way because I had a question down here that I wanted to talk to you about Rob Cole as a coach, because I think he's crazy underrated. There's a guy who is, trophied at NCAA's, however many times, plays super high, places high second in the nation multiple times out of Cornell University. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit different.
You got to define. So, people are like, obviously Cal Sanderson, John Smith, Dan Gable, those are kind of like the rotation of coaches, for the greatest of all time. But you have to define success with the parameters that you're able to find success in. So I go, all right, well, if we're talking about the greatest of all time, let's look at, past just the team trophies and obviously the national champions. Let's look at what are those parameters for each school. And I go, well, Rob Cole's easily, arguably one of the greatest head coaches of all time, just based on he walked into Cornell 32 years ago, and it's an Ivy League school. There's no scholarships. You have to obviously meet the academic requirements. So it's like, what he's been able to build at Cornell is, how could you argue against that? It's incredible. I go, could you take, and I don't know those other guys that well, but could they go to Cornell and do the same thing that Rob Cole did? That's the real question. And I go, I don't know those other guys, but there's not many people like Rob Cole in just the business and creative sense that he's been able to create this at an Ivy League school. So
I totally agree. I think we saw that a little bit when they were trying to, after this NCAA season ended abruptly, they still had to give out Coach of the Year. And I think the common discussion was, is it going to be Tom Brands for what he did at Iowa, or is it going to be Chris Ayers for what he did at Princeton? And I think there's a super strong argument either way. Is Iowa a better team than Princeton? Well, they beat them. So, but
yeah,
Chris Ayers is doing it Princeton of all places,
Yeah. You like I said, I'm not taking anything away from what Tom Brands and Cal Sanderson, John Smith, and those guys have been able to do. Obviously they've done a great job and they've built a super successful culture and program. I just want to emphasize, they're under a little bit of a different playing field than what these Ivy League schools are under. Those guys have 9.9 scholarships, and they have, their academics are not as strained. There's not a big academic strain on like their prospect and recruits. Some of them even get financial aid. So it's just like you have a lot more flexibility there as opposed to, like Princeton and Cornell and all the Ivy League schools, because, okay, great. You get a kid that's a right fit academically. Well, his parents better they better fall in the right income bracket, or guess what? It's not going to be able to work. You're not going to pay $70,000 a year for tuition. It's just not going to happen. So it's just, that's the game you got to play. Okay. You find a kid that his parents do fall in a great income bracket, then great. Then, that's awesome. Oh, wait, he's only got a 2.8 GPA, no, that's not going to happen either. So it's like our pool is way smaller. So we have to go get those kids that fall into those in those constraints. And what Rob Cole's been able to do the past he's going on his 32nd year at Cornell in this next year. So what he's been able to do for 32 years is incredible.
Man, that's so wild. 32 years. I didn't realize it had been. Keep in mind, this is a crazy stat, I think, for Rob Cole. Let's say, looking into the future, if Yanni were able to win 2 more titles, which is going to be super hard, a ton of really amazing wrestlers in those weight classes. But if Yanni becomes the 5th ever 4-time NCAA champion, there's only 5. More men have walked on the moon than accomplished this, and 2 of them will be under Rob Cole.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane.
I've talked about this with a couple different people, just this stat, and to have two of the 5 four-time NCAA champions in the history of the sport, you're right. I mean, more people have walked on the moon.
Yeah, right. I think I heard Tom Ryan say that one time, and I think it's so perfectly put. Like, it's really hard.
It's crazy. I mean, and part of it, I don't want to say. I mean, you got to understand that the relationship. The funny thing with like Kyle Dake and Yanni is Kyle Dake grew up 10 minutes away. Like Coach Cole held him when he was a baby.
Really?
His dad actually was on the coaching staff with Rob for a little bit. His dad was an All-American for Kent State back in the day. And then, when Kyle was born, Rob held him. He was at the hospital.
Wild. Wow.
And, Yanni grew up only an hour and a half away in Rochester, New York.
By the way, I bet that was the last time Dake let anybody hold him. You know what I mean? That's impossible to get a hold of.
He is. Yeah.
He's already digging underhooks, I'm sure.
Coach Cole would be sitting here telling you that, he still beats up on Kyle, when he has to. But
obviously, yeah.
That's that obviously, but that's not the case. But anyways, yeah, it's just, look at the stat just past, the school. It's just like 2 of the 4-time national champs are going to, 2 of the 5, 4-time national champs potentially are going to come within a radius of an hour and a half from each other, just growing up in New York too. It's just, I don't know what the odds of that are, but they're got to be extremely low. And, we've just been lucky to have guys like that, with the skill, the creativity, and, the different styles that they bring, and, their perspectives on the sport. To have that in the room has been just a treat. I feel like when I'm in the room every day, I'm coaching, but I'm also learning at the same time every day. And I just, I'm extremely blessed.
Let's talk about that, because technique is super big with me. I'm a guy who loves technique. That's what really fires me up about wrestling. The drama is one thing, that's all good, but I love wrestling. What kind of focus is put on technique at Cornell during practice, and how is that taught? Is that taught like in a group, like, okay, everybody, here's this armbar series, go work on it? Or is it more like one-on-one? Okay, you have a good cradle, let's work your cradle.
So the way that we structure, our practices typically don't go over, they never go over 2 hours. Typically they're around an hour and a half. And depending on what day, some practices are more intense and you're just trying to, burn them and obviously condition, and just they're harder days. And those tend to be actually probably towards more the hour and 15-minute mark. We try to keep those days shorter, but, we have amazing technicians. Mike Gray, our associate head coach, is probably one of the best technicians that I've ever been around. He, he doesn't get, as much stardom as like Kyle does, because he was only a 2-time All-American at Cornell. He could have easily been a 4-time. He's rounded 12 twice, but his technique and his studying and his film watching and his ability to break down things is incredible. So, and he's kind of Yanni's guy, and is the guy that's progressed Yanni. And then, just to have all these different skills. The one thing about Cornell that we do that's differently, we don't have a style, like Iowa has a Iowa style, there's all these different schools that kind of brand themselves on this style. We just play to the strengths and try to, patching up those weaknesses with every individual guy. It's like Gabe Dean is not going to wrestle the same way as Kyle Dake, and Kyle Dake's not going to wrestle the same way as Yanni, and Yanni's not going to wrestle the same way as, Cam Simons. It's just like, there's just going to be different. They're just different bodies. There's different things. There's different things that they're good at. There's different things they can do. So we try to kind of, we structure our practice in a way where we, as a team, we have, we just have little areas that we need to work on as a team, but then we do a lot of individual work. So between classes, about twice a week, guys, starters and guys on our team will schedule 30 to 45 minutes out with their coaches. Like, they'll come in and I'll work on just their specific areas about once or twice a week. And those are just little technique practices that nothing too taxing at all. And we do that with all of our guys about once or twice a week, or they bring in one of their teammates and we focus on their 2 areas and we work with them in these little 30 to 45-minute clips about twice a week. So we try to play to the strengths of our athletes. We don't try to change them and mold them into, a certain style, because why would you not play to the strengths and then, try to just fill in those weaknesses? That's kind of our take on it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It almost surprises me to hear you say there is not a Cornell style, because when I think of Cornell, I do think about people who are going to be good in all 3 areas. They're going to be able to ride. They're going to be able to get out. and they're going to be able to do this from a pretty early stage. I don't see a lot of Cornell kids coming out, even as like freshmen, who are having a lot of the same mat issues that I see with just other big programs. Is that something you guys like look for? Like what?
I will say we put a lot of emphasis on the mat because everybody when you get to this level, we always say is like really good on their feet. I mean, everybody puts such an emphasis on the neutral position. That's just, I don't know why. That's just the way the sport kind of is. So the big thing is let's put an emphasis. You have to be able to get off bottom. If you can't get off bottom in college wrestling, it's not going to happen for you. You're going to lose a lot of matches. And if you're able to ride and get your riding time point and ride a guy out in whatever period you're on top every single match, or if you get a takedown and that guy's not going to get away from you, well, that's a huge advantage. Think about it. If you get a riding time point and you get an escape every single match and you never let a guy escape, you're up 2-0 going into every match before the match even starts. So being really good on the mat and having mat savviness and mat awareness is huge for this in college wrestling. It's imperative. So, and even in international, I mean, you're a technique guy. You love watching. I'm sure you watch all the international guys. You watch Sagilev and these guys. They're amazing at gut wrenches. They're amazing at lacing. They're great in their parterre. Well, I think that's actually what separates the guys that are in the top 5 in the world and then the best guy in the world. He's going to be amazing on the mat. If you look at that in college wrestling, it's kind of the same. If you look at the top 5 guys in the country, they're all really good on their feet. There's no doubt about it. But the guy that typically wins is the guy that's probably best on the mat. And that's just the way it is.
I agree 100%. And I do watch a lot of international. And I was actually recently watching a lot of Sagilev because I was kind of just trying to like figure out like what makes this guy why is the best guy the best? You know what I mean? Why is nobody getting to his legs? Why all these things? And something really interesting that I figured out, like 90% of the time he goes to his left when he attacks, but even when he gets a takedown, almost every time within 5 seconds, he's getting a turn and he's getting it with a gut wrench to the left. And so, yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. He's always turning points into more points with his mat work. Yeah,
his transitions from his knee pulls and his single legs into his gut wrench, which is definitely by far his best turn. I don't see him do too many laces.
Almost never. Gut wrench and almost always to his left. It's very rarely even to the right.
Yes, which it's just like his transition and his awareness just like when he comes off of a takedown right into that, it's like his hand placement, his awareness and where he's going is just so spot on that I mean, obviously the guy is just incredible. He barely ever gets scored on. So his head and hands defense is actually on his feet. What impresses me most, it's not even his offense, just his like, you can't touch his legs.
Ever, man, nobody.
It's insane. And if you, for some reason, touch his legs, he is so good. Like his baseline and even his funk. I mean, I don't think he gets enough credit for it because you just don't see guys on his legs that much. But I've seen a couple just flurries when guys have gotten to his legs and his ability just to like get out of that. I mean, he cartwheels, he does crazy things. And he's like, it's amazing. I mean, he's a pound for pound best wrestler in the world for a reason. But his head and hands defense on his feet is more impressive to me than any of the offense that he does just because it's so hard to touch his legs. The best guys in the world never touch his legs.
It says a lot when the guy who wrestles with Kyle Dake every day is calling your head hands defense really, really good. So praise from Caesar. So yeah. I want to get back to Cornell, and we were talking about being on the mat and what makes Cornell a little bit different. And obviously I want to talk about your career as well, but you're Mr. Cornell, I feel like. So I love talking about this kind of stuff.
I love it, man. I love it.
So Cornell has a history of a couple of things at NCAAs, and the mat work might be a big part of it that I want to discuss. They place a lot of freshmen at the NCAA tournament, and they place a lot of lighter weights. I think Flo recently did a breakdown. They figured out Cornell over the last 15 years has had the most successful 125 pounder, which is usually a very chaotic weight class. It's really hard to place freshmen, and it's really hard to place lighter weights consistently. Why is Cornell so successful at this?
Well, I mean, lighter weights, I got to go ahead and give Mike great credit again. He's kind of our lighter weight coach, and he's done a great job.
The upper weights are doing great too, by the way. I don't mean to.
No. Hey, no, I'm all about it. I love Mike Gray. I love Rob Cole and just our staff, and I think Mike Gray's done an amazing job again, and I think also on the recruiting end, we've been able to bring a lot of really talented, lightweight guys in. So when they're wrestling with each other, Vito, Yanni, Chaz Tucker, all these guys, when they're wrestling with each other, they're just making each other better. And the reason I think we do so well at NCAAs with freshmen is because we have this program in place where they can come and they can actually take a gap year between college wrestling, between their high school and their college wrestling, and train in our Olympic Training Center. So we have them for the majority. I mean, Yanni and Kyle didn't, but like myself, my brother Vito Darmstadt, the majority of guys do this, and it's kind of our way of redshirting in the Ivy League. And I believe that's probably why we've been able to have the most success and most freshmen All-Americans competing with. We're up there, if not the best team, but one of the top 3 best teams that have been producing the most freshman All-Americans on a consistent basis. And I think it's probably largely due to that year, just because they're in the room training, getting used to, that level of wrestling, which we all have to make an adjustment. I mean, when Yanni first came in, he was getting beat up by like the second and third string guys for the first couple months, and then he adjusted incredibly well. Same thing with Kyle Dake. You hear stories all the time, but I think that year in that program has allowed, and just the training environment in general, and with Coach Gray and what he's been able to do has been incredible too. So I just think a mix of all that has allowed us to have all those All-Americans as freshmen, and also just such lightweight success with the recruits and the talent that we've been able to bring in.
I actually saw Kyle Dake's first college wrestling duel online live. I went to the University of Maryland, and that was his first.
Oh boy!
Yeah.
Oh boy! And that was a prominent moment. I know exactly.
Huge. Yeah.
That was kind of the first time he had made his statement as like, I'm here now. That was a huge turning point for him.
I was there for his first ever match. He was facing Alex Crom, who was a friend of mine. I knew Crom was super ready for the season, so it wasn't a matter of him being unprepared. And Kyle, true freshman, you would expect to have a lot of trouble with a guy who was in the national semis the year before. He wins super late. I think he scored a 4-point move, the first ever Dake bomb in college wrestling. And he ended up having, that was the start of just so much, right?
Yeah, it was.
Dynamite.
It was kind of, and that was like when the Friedman Center was rocking. It was Spotlight, it was just like a very prominent moment. I've seen the highlight a couple times, and you're not lying, man. It was definitely a Dake bomb. Sorry for your friend there, but
it happens. You got to wrestle.
It happens, man. Right?
I assure you, I've lost more than Alex, so no problem. I want to get back to you. I want to get back to the program. You were talking about all this success and taking a year off and all this, and you were talking about wrestling styles, which is definitely something I wanted to return to, because I wanted to talk about your specific wrestling style. You had what actually I guess a lot of people might call an Iowa type of style. You were very bullying, a lot of forward pressure, a lot of control ties, especially your Underhook series was great for so many years. Was this just something that came to you naturally and you built on that, or was this something that was kind of taught to you and instilled in you?
So I don't know if you remember him, but Cam Simez was a 4-time All-American national champ for us, and he was from my area in Michigan. And when I was, made my commitment to Cornell, he came home when I was a senior, and he worked out with me, and he had this super high-paced style, and it wasn't like mine, but he was just, a lot of outside motion and ankle picks and just super, super high pace. And he beat me so bad for an hour and a half straight. I couldn't move to the point, I'm a senior in high school, but I was so inspired by the way he wrestled. I was like, that style, that's the way I want to wrestle. I want to be able to wrestle just high paced motor like that. And I didn't have the length that Cam did, so I wasn't going to be doing ankle picks that much or anything like that. So it was going to be more, how can Gabe wrestle that style? Well, it's going to be probably through hand fighting and, high level attacks and, just real, baseline fundamental good wrestling. So it wasn't going to be outside and ankle picks and, that kind of thing. So I was so inspired by that, when I got to Cornell and Cam and I sat down and we kind of figured out how we were going to go about it. And I trained with him my whole gap year that I was just mentioning before. And we developed kind of this baseline of this style that it was going to be for me. Like I said, underhooks, inside ties, clearing ties, just moving forward the whole time, hand fighting hard, changing levels to high level attacks, single legs, high crotches, just real good fundamental wrestling, but always, having a high pace, because that's what Cam prided himself on. And that's ultimately what I was inspired by when the beatdowns that Cam gave me were were just astronomical. I mean, I remember one time I was so tired and I'm laying on the ground and my shirt's off. We wrestled a 2-hour go. I have a sock off and my shoe off on one foot because he's ankle picked me so many times. and there's just a golden rule. Like when I wrestled Cam, you just don't stop. And my other foot had my shoe and my sock on. So I was literally had my shirt off. I was dripping, soaking sweat. I had barefoot on one foot, and then I had my shoe on the other one. And I'm laying face down on the mat, and he pulled all of a sudden I feel my shirt coming over my face, and I'm like, oh, what the heck? And then all of a sudden I'm being choked out by my own shirt. And I like jump up and I'm like, what the heck? And he's like, see, you still have energy. And I was like, man, you're like, as much as I want to like kill you right now, you're right. Like if you put me in a life and death situation, like I was able to move. So he just taught me that, that mindset of just like never stopping, no matter how much pain you feel. And then we just incorporated it with the technical side, and that's where I developed my style. So,
man, I think that's so perfect because it goes to show that with so many systems, I find this a lot because what you have is a system. You get to your control tie and you go for your attack. If this happens, you do this instead. If this happens, you'll do that instead. It's kind of that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And that everybody I talk to that has one of those, it always starts with a little bit of planning and the right mentality that you're talking about. And I just think seeing that across everybody has been really interesting for me. Yeah,
the mentality, is so important. The technique's obviously incredibly important too, but the mentality is so important because that's kind of like what the gas is, like that's what drives it. And then the technique blossoms. And I found if you got a guy more tired in a match and you exhausted him, your technique got better. So it just made sense for me, and that's what I was inspired by. And like I said, like Cornell, we figure out what the guy's strengths are, and I was just a strong guy that was inspired to wrestle super hard, so they played to that, and then we just developed my style from there.
That makes a ton of sense. So you had a ton of success early on. Did you find yourself having to evolve or change that as guys started to having to evolve your techniques as guys started to scout you as you kept having success in college?
For sure. The success came at a surprise to me early on. I didn't know how successful I was going to be I didn't even win in a college open that first year that I was doing my gap year. So I didn't know what kind of wrestler I was going to be. But as I continued to progress, in my career, obviously the target becomes on your back. You're the number one guy in the country and people are coming for you. So you have to still be creative and you have to be developing more and more technique. You just have to. And I was lucky enough to have, really, Damian Hahn and Mike Gray were kind of my guys, and they were both skilled at two very different things in two very different areas. So I was lucky to have those two guys where when I'd come in for my individuals that I was talking about earlier for 30 to 45 minutes, we were always trying to find new and creative ties and ways to set up our attacks and get to the legs and, just different kind of creative things. And so my style continued to evolve because if you stop being creative and you stop evolving in the sport of wrestling or any combat sport, everybody's going to catch up to you eventually. So it's important to continue to develop more and more technique. And, I was lucky enough to have two guys that really understood that.
I think that's fantastic. And we do have a lot of this knowledge already up on the site. We have your product, Underhook Domination by Gabe Dean. It is a total underhook takedown system that people can get now. It's a multi-volume series on there. I was the guy you threw around for this, so I can personally attest that and all this stuff definitely works.
Yeah, it was fun, man. You were great. You were a great partner, man. You did a great job. So I gave pretty much everything I had from an underhook series standpoint in that series. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Man, we got to have you back up soon. I mean it.
I look forward to it, man. Anytime.
I know you're busy. You have the Dean's List, your new podcast that you've been doing. You've been talking to all these. That's the name of it, right? I got this right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You got it right. You nailed it.
Okay, great. What are some things that you've learned doing this podcast so far?
Man, first of all, without the team that I have, I've been lucky to have a wonderful producer, a guy that understands how to cut up the video and do all, the sound and all that. And then, just the, the crafts of emails, the social media side of, producing and marketing that. I have actually like 3 people that with me that are amazing at that. So I've learned a ton from that angle, just from them, and just, continuing to kind of get into this world of social media. I wasn't big into it before, but now I'm starting to kind of get rolling in it. So I'm actually enjoying that. And I've learned a lot about that. And then on the podcast side, just from the guests, I really started the podcast just to be able to pick the brains of these like incredibly, successful human beings in their craft. So it came out of a place where I was just trying to learn, and then it kind of got some light, and it started to pick up, and it's pretty heavily followed now, which I've been really lucky to have that. But the things that I've learned, the UFC champs, just picking their brains about being in the octagon and the kind of different, pressures and stresses and, adjustments that takes is completely different from wrestling, that I came to find out. And in some ways it's similar. And then the business people, Joe DeSena and Mike Novogratz and these guys, and how they've kind of taken sport and used it and applied it to the business world. That's been really interesting to learn. And then, I've had kids on, like the Zach Anglin kid who was born without hands and feet, and then, started wrestling in 8th grade and had to develop his own style in order to be successful, and became a 2-time Wisconsin State placer. Now he's the first commercial pilot, quad amputee commercial pilot. So just learning how he's had to adapt his whole life without having hands and feet. I mean, yeah, so it's been incredible just to learn the different perspectives and the different things from the guests. I've taken so much from it, and just very fortunate to be doing it.
Man, I hear you. I definitely want to go back and check out that the episode with the pilot you were talking about. A friend of mine named Ron was actually, for a period of time, the #1 ranked para submission grappler on earth.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And I was like I was his coach for a lot of that. And I was like trying to, man, if you thought you've like had to like think about technique, suddenly think about technique, but the guy can't use a leg.
It's insane. Yeah. I mean, like it's insane. It's like, I asked him, I was like, so like, Zach, like, have you ever just thought about the fact that, like your life and how did you continue to progress forward with the fact that you just weren't going to be able to do things with hands and feet? Like we use hands and feet. It's so much. It's so imperative. And he's like, like ever since he's one of 18 kids, so he's adopted, he's the 3rd youngest of 18 kids. And he said, Gabe, it's ever since I was young and I can remember, and maybe people think this is child abuse, but I'm very grateful for it. My parents would never help me with just basic tasks. So he's like, when I grow up, and I was like, hey mom, can you reach up and grab the juice for me? She's like, oh, you got to figure it out. Or like, okay, mom, can, I was in the wrestling room and I was like, hey, can you teach me this move? My coach was like, no, like, you got to figure it out. And like, here's how I would do it, but we got to figure out how you would do it. And he's like, you got to kind of figure out what's that comfortable, setting for you. So it's just interesting to hear him, for a guy to be so positive, and a lot of kids would take that as like negative, that type of negativeness in their life. But he was like, no, it was really good for my development. So he's like, I was lucky to have great role models and coaches and people that, made me adapt to my condition.
Man, sounds like a winner's mindset. I'm not surprised he's
yeah.
I mean,
yeah. No, honestly, it was definitely gave me a lot of great perspective for sure.
So, question about high school kids recruiting. We're kind of talking about this and the mindset of, young men as they're coming up. You're somebody who I know is crazy important to the recruiting process at Cornell. I don't want to say you're like the lead of it. That might be incorrect, but you're certainly very, very key to that process. And Cornell brings in one of the top recruiting classes every year. So clearly you're very successful at it. What is a lesson or value that you wish recruits knew more often? What are like some common red flags you see? You know what I mean?
Man, on the technical side, I'm always looking for kids that are aggressors. Like, that's just, I love the aggressive style. So on the technical side, if, I see some kids, but I feel like some kids think it's almost like cooler to do these fancy moves and these kind of things. It's like, no, I really want to see the fundamentals and like an aggressiveness. So that's one thing on the technical side that I'd like to see kids doing more. I see it out of some kids, but some kids I don't think understand that, and they want to be the next Jordan Burroughs or Kyle Dake or these guys. And it's like, no, they got there based upon their fundamentals. So work on the fundamentals more. And then obviously the aggressiveness, the mentality behind those fundamentals. So I'd like to see that more. And thank God there's a company out there producing videos like yourself so that these kids can pick out these fundamentals, because I'm pretty sure these guys that you have in, all these super high level guys, I mean, you've had Dacon and all these guys. It's like,
we had Gabe Dean. He was great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what they're teaching is like baseline fundamental stuff that's really good for, just in their own perspective and their own, through their own lens. So it's like, I wish kids understood that more. And then the second thing I would say is, the character, just don't go on social media and be an idiot. That would be the big thing. Is like, some of these kids, it's like, so many people are looking at the social media. So I look at all the kids' social media. Like, that is one of the big tellers to me. I don't care how good you are at wrestling at the end of the day. If you have terrible character flaws and I see that, and I'm just not bringing you into our program, it's just not going to happen. So I'm talent's super important. Don't get me wrong. You have to have it, but the character is also just right there with it. So, and I some programs, I don't think maybe place an emphasis on the character side as much as I do, but when it comes to Cornell and our success, it doesn't have to do with just talent. We need kids that are there, that want to work, that are there, organizing themselves to get an Ivy League education, at the same time wrestling at an extremely high level, at the same time preparing themselves for the rest of their life. It's not just 5 years. It's not just 4 years that you're coming here. You're preparing yourself to be a better man. And the character thing, I wish some kids understood a little bit more. What you're putting out there is direct reflection on how you carry yourself to a certain extent. So that would be the other thing that I would say.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great lesson. I hope every younger kid who wants to eventually take it to the next level and wants to commit themselves to wrestling at the next level and competing at the highest possible levels hears that, because I think that's really important.
There's companies that are dedicated to exposing that. I mean, there's literally companies dedicated to exposing, what you've put out there when you were in 7th grade. So yeah. So it's just, it's important. But sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I was just waffling. I want to take a chance to plug some of the social media for ourselves. I want to make sure everybody knows they can go ahead and get into our Facebook group. Gabe, if you're not a part of it already, obviously, more than welcome to join.
I would hope I would be. If I'm not, I'm jumping in it.
Yeah, well, man, we'll make you an admin tonight.
Oh, great.
And check us out on Twitter. We're at Fanatic Wrestling. Subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the Dean's List as well. Gabe, I have some more like lightning round style questions I want to throw out before we wrap up.
Hit me, man.
Good. These are things I ask all the athletes. I just like seeing like what the cross section is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's a wrestling lesson that you wish you learned earlier?
Wrestling lesson I wish I would have learned earlier: to not cut weight.
Interesting. Talk about that.
I'm not a believer in cut weight. I don't think anybody should cut weight. I'm going to go as far as saying it, unless your team absolutely needs you at the high school level, then I don't think you should cut weight till you get to college. And even when you get to college, I don't think you should cut that much weight. So I'm a huge advocate for not cutting that much weight, because I think to a certain point, it actually decreases your productivity than increases it. And I see way too many guys cut way too much weight. They stop focusing on developing in the sport. They start focusing on just losing weight all the time, and it takes away their love and their passion and their drive. And the younger that you start that, the worse it gets. So I'm a huge advocate for not cutting that much weight.
What's on your mind right before a match?
Usually it's just kind of chill. I guess early in my career, there'd be some like Eminem song going through my head or something like that, and it just get pumped up. But, before my matches, I would just be kind of, focused on, what I was out there to execute, my purpose, what was like, was I going out there to win, or was I going out there to enforce my style and what I really draw pride from, and that's my purpose, and that's where I try to keep my focus, because anything that you start thinking about winning and losing, you start thinking all about that stuff. It makes you wrestle tight, it makes you compete tight. I took serious pride in not being result driven. I took serious pride in being, my preparation was the best, and my execution was, followed my preparation So that was what I was focused on. I didn't care, try to surrender the outcome and go out there and take care of business.
What's the first move that you remember getting good at?
The first move I got good at was actually, and this actually speaks to the series, was just an underhook throw by. I would throw an underhook in, and I would just throw the kid by, and I'd grab his leg, and that was kind of what I was known for when I was growing up. That's one of the only moves that I understood that well was, hey, jam your arm in here and then just throw him over top your shoulder and grab his leg as it goes by. So that was probably the first move that I remember getting really good at.
I know you played football and you were a quarterback. Did you underhook usually with your throwing arm?
I underhooked with my left. No, is my other arm, my left arm. And
that's interesting because I would say it was like you were throwing a football or something. You're just recreating the motion, but
I underhooked with my left arm because I could use my right hand. I was right-handed, so I could use my right hand to attack the legs. So yeah, I was underhook with my left side, but I can underhook with my right side too. So yeah, I was doing it with my right, so that's why I looked like a throwing motion.
What's the first thing a young wrestler should learn? Young, like elementary school age. You know what I mean?
From the just stance position, just your baseline position techniques, lead leg forward. You'd be blown away. I go to do so many camps, and these kids, they're left-handed, but they have their right leg forward. And I'm just like, man, this is crazy. Or they're opposite, they're right-handed, but they have their, left leg forward, or they're left-handed, and they have their right leg. It's just basic, like if you're right-handed, your right leg staggered forward. Head and hands, just baseline, not bending at your back, just squatting at your knees, and then being able to move efficiently in there. So, a lot of just stance, position, baseline, just position, because everything comes from your stance, everything comes from your position. So that would be the number one thing.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to go from good to great?
The best piece of advice that I'd give somebody is just really understand your clarity, be clear on, what your purpose is, because if you don't understand what your purpose is, you can be pretty good at something, just, kind of going through the motions, but what drives being great is that whatever, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, all the greats that are in combat sports and wrestling, they all understand and are very clear on what their purpose is. When they're competing in their everyday lives, how they're living their life 24 hours a day, they're very, very clear on, what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I'd say really have a sense of clarity on your purpose if you want to go from being just pretty good at something to great at something.
That's all fantastic, Gabe. I want to thank you for being here today. I think it's been wonderful. I want to give you a chance right now to plug anything that you would like, in terms of your social media or anything that you have going on.
Yeah, so, we have a Facebook page called the Dean's List Talk Show. That'd be great. And then on Instagram, it's just at Dave Jean. On Twitter, at Dave Jean. On Apple iTunes, you can find our podcast, the Dean's List Talk Show. And it'd be great. Just follow it all.
Perfect, man. Everybody should go find it all. Like you talked about, you guys are having on some, I heard you were starting a podcast. I was like, oh, cool. Good for Gabe. That's going to be really interesting. Then I started seeing the guests you were getting, man. It's, the lineup is unbelievable.
Well, hey, no, the worst that they can say is no. So you just go for it.
Man, that's what I've been with, with Fanatics. Michael was, he was like, go sign some wrestlers. I came back with like 6 world champions. He's like, how'd you do that? I was like, oh, I offered the money.
Yeah, the money helps. Money talks.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple after that.
Yeah. So well, you guys have done a great job, man. You guys have had amazing clinicians on. So
Thank you, I appreciate it. And you're definitely on that list. And we would love to have you back on really soon. Right now, people can go find your first series, Underhook Domination, to get a really complete understanding of this underhook takedown series that was proven at the highest levels of folk style wrestling to work. 2 NCAA championships, 4-time All-American, I think never placing lower than 3rd. I mean, this is all not by mistake. This is stuff that really works, and I think that this is stuff anybody, wrestlers of any age, could benefit from. So
absolutely.
Gabe, thank you so much for being on. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks a ton. Appreciate it, Joe.